Good evening. Welcome to another Gin Me Live. How you doing, Tom?
I couldn't be better, to be honest. It's Friday night. It's the weekend. It's here. I'm feeling good, and I've got a gin in my glass. So yeah, I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah, our first ever Friday night tasting, and I don't know. We've got a few people in the room already. Maybe this is what we should be doing from now on.
Yeah, maybe weekend tastings.
Maybe it is the way. Cool. Well, this month is it's our October gin. Of course, it's November now, but it's the gin that everyone received around about 2 weeks ago, and it is, of course, Jensen's Bermondsey Dry Gin. And we're super excited to be doing this tasting. We've got Charlie, who basically runs the distillery, coming in to chat with us about it. So without further ado, we'll introduce Charlie. Hello.
Hi, Charlie.
How you doing, guys?
Very good.
Great. Always good to see someone broadcasting live from the distillery. We love that.
Excellent. Yep. I know. Sorry if you hear any rumbling going on. There's a couple of trains overhead. So.
And just to confirm, this is not, you haven't got like a colourful board behind you and you're actually sat in your spare room. You are actually
yeah, exactly.
It's real. No, I am currently sat in the distillery on my own in pretty much the dark. So yeah.
Is that a normal thing for you, Charlie? Or
yeah, this is what I do. This is what I do. I just sit here in the dark and wait for people to put me into webinars.
Once the day's work is done, yeah, brilliant. You just said that the distillery's under a railway arch. You're in Bermondsey there in London, aren't you?
We are indeed, yeah. Only a couple of 100 meters from London Bridge and the Shard, and again a couple of 100 meters from Tower Bridge. So we're very easily sort of visitable. We're open 7 days a week as a distillery, so people can just pop on down. They can come down for tours and tastings, and we've got a bar on the weekends as well during the day. So yeah, we love having people come down and have a look around. It's a really cool thing to be able to go to a local London distillery.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's maybe start with the start of things. Do you want to talk a little bit about the sort of the origins of the brand?
Yeah, so Tristan Jensen, who is the founder and creator of Jensen's Gin, was working in Japan back in the early 2000s. And when he was there, he was very lucky to try some very old school style gins from the 1960s. And he was convinced that gin in the past was a lot better than it was by the year 2000. He was convinced that most of the gins that were around at the time were not what he remembered from when he was a kid. And this was kind of backed up but when he started talking to a gentleman who ran a little izakaya over in Japan, a guy called Oda-san, who gave him some of this very old school gin and got him to try it. And he absolutely loved it. And when he came back to this country, kind of inspired by this, he decided to create what would eventually become the Bermondsey Dry. And it was designed entirely for himself originally. And the whole idea behind it was that it was a gin from yesteryear, from the previous century, and it went back to what he thought gin should taste like. He had a very, very strong idea in his mind. And so he set about creating a gin, and it was originally made in Thames Distillers, which is actually relatively close to here. It was one of only 2 distilleries in London that were kind of producing at the time. And he started working with a fellow called Charles Maxwell, and they set upon 10 very, very classic botanicals. So this is way before the kind of gin renaissance, before everything got really big in gin again, in around 2003. And so we don't have a hook. Our hook is that we don't have one. We make gin that goes all the way back to what gin in our minds should taste like. And so there's no Sherpa sweat, there's no dolphin tears, it doesn't change color, it doesn't glow in the dark, it doesn't make you sexy. Well, it makes me sexy if you drink enough. But the whole idea of it is that it is a classic quintessential ginny gin. It makes the best gin and tonic that I've ever had, personally speaking, and an absolutely delicious martini. But I also drink it on its own very, very easily. And we think that's something that a lot of people should or can bring back. You know, it's up to you how you drink it. So we then set up this distillery in 2013 with the still you see behind me, which was made by John Dole. And we've been distilling on this site ever since.
Nice. Good, succinct story there. So You've also got the Old Tom gin as well, which I believe was launched at the same time, right? Were they both launched from the get-go?
A little bit later. So 2003 for the Bermondsey Dry, and then 2007 for the Old Tom.
Oh, was it that much later? Was it? Okay. Jill, I mean, we're not drinking that tonight. We haven't sent that out. And I don't think we've actually ever sent an Old Tom. But do you want to just talk like briefly about that?
Yeah, of course. So basically, the Old Tom is quite a unique gin in that Christian wanted to bring back the style of Old Tom. For people who don't know where Old Tom comes from, there's quite a lot of stories as to its origins. One of them is that people used to water down their gin before giving it to customers. And to hide that fact, they'd add three things. So they'd add cayenne pepper, which was very spicy and made it taste more alcoholic. They would add a sweetener or some sort of flavor enhancer. I suppose it could be described as, but a lot of people believe that would be sugar. And they also apparently used to add terps, as in turpentine, white spirit, which is obviously not particularly good for you and tends to make people go a bit crazy. But it made a very robust, sweet style of gin. And we wanted to bring that back. So Kristen did a lot of research and we discovered a recipe in the Distiller's notebook in the 1840s that basically had a very, very similar set of botanicals to the Bermondsey Dry, which we were already making, but in a very different ratio. So we upped Angelica, we upped the licorice, we upped the orange, and it made a much more punchy, spicy gin. But it's actually, they're both sat at the same percentage, but whilst the Bermondsey Dry, which is the one you're going to try, is relatively light, it's delicate, it's floral, it's citrusy. The Old Tom is big, it's powerful, it's got girth, and it's the kind of thing that would stand up very well in a Negroni, for example. So it has a bigger kind of gravity, more viscosity to it. So we wanted to have both ends of the spectrum when it came to gin. So we've got the light and delicate, we've got the big and punchy as well. We think that covers a lot of different necessities.
Can I ask you, Charlie, with the Old Tom and the London Dry, obviously we talk about a sort of, with Old Tom specifically, more of a sort of sweetness in terms of style. Are you saying that most or all of your sweetness comes from the botanicals themselves as opposed to any... I mean, I'm not saying there's not any additional sugars, but obviously licorice, for example, is quite sweet. Is that where a lot of the sweetness is coming from the botanicals?
No, 100% of the sweetness is coming from. We don't use sugar in our Old Tom. It's not to say that that's the wrong way of doing it or the right way of doing it. We believe that a lot of companies back then would have used licorice, and that's what we exclusively use. So all of our sweetness, all of the sweet flavor that's in there comes purely from licorice root. There is no additions after it. It is technically actually a London Dry gin as well as an Old Tom.
Yeah. So I remember, I don't know, I thought you were there, Tom, as well, actually, but now maybe you weren't. But I remember the first and perhaps only, no, I think they did more than one, class bar show. So Simon Difford did a class bar show about 16 years ago.
Okay.
And he might have done one or two others, but this was the first one. It was a really small affair. And Christian was there with his gins. And it was the first time I met him, but I was kind of aware of him because of the Old Tom rather than the Bermondsey Dry. And because he had controversially made this Old Tom gin, but not sweetened it. And I remember chatting with him about it and how he was saying that the recipes that he'd researched didn't contain sugar. And so in his mind, you know, it didn't need to be sweetened with sugar. You could use sweet botanicals instead. And I was like, okay. And I mean, it's like that sort of conversation didn't happen in the bar industry, you know, 16 years ago. Everyone's the way the gin.
I can't think of another Old Tom at that time.
Well, at the time, I think there might have been one or two other ones in the market, but I don't, you know, and I don't. One of them was American, I think.
I think there was one other that was American, definitely. I don't know. I'm not saying there isn't. I don't know of any British Old Toms at that time. And it's not to say that there wasn't. That's just me not knowing.
Well, let's put it this way. If none of us can remember any, the ones that were available didn't really make that much of an impact.
That's it.
Right?
That's it.
I can't think of a single one.
Well, I mean, first Old Tom I ever came across when I was bartending, which was around at that same time, was this one. So I was using both on my bar of 2008, 2009. So back a bit.
But it is important to sort of recognise the dates here because it's very easy in this sort of current gin boom period to kind of get there's a lot happened in sort of 5 years, and even more happened in 10. And I think it's worth recognizing that this is an old brand in the modern era now, Jensen's. It's been around for 20 odd years, and that makes it old. Not as old as Tanqueray and Beefeater and all that sort of stuff, of course, but in our modern context, it's about as old as you get.
Yeah. So along with Martin Miller's, because they were 2003 as well, and then before that, you've only got really Hendrix and Bombay Sapphire.
Which are big brands, obviously. Yeah,
you start going back into incredibly well-known historic brands. So we are certainly one of the oldest of the modern brands, if that makes sense. Before it all kind of kicked off and went absolutely crazy.
Sorry. No, you go ahead, Charlie.
We'd love to say that it was Christian was predicting where the market was going to go. I'm sure he would love to pretend that he knew exactly what was going to happen in the future. The reality is he made this for himself entirely. This was a project that was, when it was first created, the first 1,200 bottles were bought for personal consumption, not for sale. This was literally, he had to buy in large bulk because the way it was produced at the time meant they had to buy 1,200 bottles. He'd had to set up a gin company, or at least a company, to be able to buy it in the first place. He'd had to have it bottled, because obviously we had to have it bottled, and he had to get a label to make it legal. So he accidentally set up a gin company in order to buy gin for himself, and ended up with a rather large amount that people actually turned out to really like. And that's where we kind of kicked off from.
Right, it's amazing. It's what I was going to say is that obviously it's quite incredible and fitting. You look at the history of gin, especially in London, and how far it goes back, and especially where you're positioned around London Bridge and that sort of area. And like you say, being one of, if not the first in line in terms of the resurgence of gin. It's really quite it's a cycle, isn't it? You're right at the forefront, or have been right at the forefront of this resurgence of gin since the beginning. Yeah. Before that, it was 200 years ago. So it's quite fascinating.
We've definitely benefited from that resurgence, but I don't think we'd take a lot of credit for it. But we definitely benefited from the likes of Hendrix coming in, Sipsmith obviously made a huge splash, and a number of other gin companies have. But a rising tide raises all ships, so we all benefit when people like gin. There's enough people going around. There's enough people drinking gin, so it's not a major.
Until such a point that the market gets saturated with sort of approximations of gin, and
don't talk about it, okay? Don't talk about it. It's fine.
Cool. So I think we've got a pretty good background on the gin. So you mentioned the distillery was from 2017, was it? 2013.
2013, yeah.
Right. And then, so that's obviously a pretty significant step change for the brand, because you're going from sort of sourcing production at Thames. That's pretty easy. You're not handling really anything. They're buying all the necessary ingredients and bits and pieces, of course, to your recipe, and doing all the bottling and then sending it on to distribution. And all of a sudden, you've got raw ingredients and neutral spirit and stills and personnel and boxes and bottles and things knocking about the place. Plus, you've obviously got the pressure to be producing the same product that was being made before. And of course, that's not just as simple as making the same recipe, because you've got equipment with all its sort of quirks and things like that. So I don't know if you were around at that time or not, Charlie, but can you sort of explain how that sort of process went, maybe?
Of course. I wasn't. I've worked here for about 2.5 years. So my predecessors, who some of them are quite famous, were the ones who basically helped Christian with recreating it. And I believe it took them a year to recreate it, from what was originally made at Thames Distillers to what was made here. I think there was a year gap of them having to work to figure out how to use this still, because every still is so beautifully unique. This is the only one of its kind in the world, and the one it was made on is the only one of its kind in the world. So, trying to replicate the Jensen's flavor on a different still with different people, and it was, I believe, quite a challenge. But it's one that they really wanted to do. They wanted to bring everything in-house. We wanted to have our own distillery. It was very important to Christian. It was very important to the people who were distilling here at the time. And yeah, they did a fantastic job. Again, I'd love to take credit for it, but there's nothing to do with me. Yeah, it is not an easy thing for people who don't know much about stills. The still can change the flavor of a spirit dramatically in so many ways. The angle of everything, the size of everything, the materials you're using, the temperature, the gradients, and all this stuff can completely change the resulting product. So to recreate something that was made somewhere else authentically is not a quick process, and it requires, I believe, a heck of a lot of work. So yeah, a massive credit to them.
Nice. Yeah. And what an ambitious kind of move as well, right? I think, you know, I guess it's kind of easy to get comfortable when someone else is making it for you, but to have that ambition to sort of take the brand to the next level and to do it in the middle of London as well, where everything's more expensive, whether it's engineers or parking or, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's cool.
Yeah. Did you see, I mean, like you say, you weren't there at the beginning of it at that time, but did the brand see a significant impact of having that home, you know, in Bermondsey on the brand itself at that point? Do you know?
I don't know if the sales have been dramatically increased by us having a home. I know it was dramatically increased by having the likes of Dr. Anne Brock and Hannah working here as well. So it's Hannah Lanfear. I know that they did an enormous amount of work in, you know, making it as worthwhile a product as it is, and managing to spread its popularity across the whole of Great Britain and beyond. I wouldn't be able to say if having a brand home specifically impacted. I would imagine it probably did. You know, being able to get people through the doors. We've run tours as well for a very long time. We've had an outside bar, and I know that used to be incredibly popular because this whole area didn't really have a lot of. You know, this is way before the Bermondsey Beer Mile was really a big thing, and we're sat on the Bermondsey Beer Mile, so you know we had a lot of people drinking around here, and I know that in sales, in that sense, yeah, it would have hugely affected having a brand home. And it is. I mean, it's really cool. Look, I mean, we've got still, and you can literally come in and have a drink.
It's hard to put into words, but I mean, I live in London. Tristan's down in Cornwall, but obviously Tristan used to work in London as well, and I know the street very well, or the area very well, and used to do a lot of work when they work with Diageo at the Hyde, for example, just down the way from you guys. Yeah. And that street specifically has so much going on there that it must be, you know, you must get so much traffic and so much happening in terms of the amount of bars, quality bars and pubs and everything just within, you know, 500, 600 yards, right?
Yeah, it's got a lot busier around this area. But then, I mean, COVID had a pretty profound effect as well, because obviously everyone then pushed everything onto the street. A lot of places started diversifying what they were doing, started selling drinks. So whilst we used to be pretty much the only place in this locale selling drinks, now there's, as I said, there's 50 other places. So it does mean that the foot traffic is huge down here. For any of the people who are living in London or coming to London, I would strongly recommend coming to Maltby Street Market, which is just towards London Bridge from us, Tower Bridge, because it's fantastic. The food's amazing, and you've got so many brilliant breweries, like, as you said, Hyber, who are next door, and Sebastian Hobday and Colonel and the likes. We've got some amazing stuff down here. So it's well worth spending a Saturday and a Sunday.
Definitely. And Borough Market's not that far either, is it? Well, it's like 10 minutes, less than a 10-minute walk away.
I'm quite short, so like 15 for me, but maybe 10 for you. I don't know how. We're not actually met, so I don't know how tall you are, but I'm a bit of a hobbit. So
4'11". No, I'm not.
Yeah, no, it's close, and you've got London, London Bridge Station just down the way as well, and then Tower Bridge just behind me.
Yeah, you've got a full day out just within half a square mile. Yeah,
it's a really interesting, beautifully developing area as well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I mean, one other thing I'll add to that whole having a distillery thing is the sort of unquantifiable advocacy side of it, where, I mean, obviously you've got a revenue stream from selling bottles there or selling drinks or merchandise or tours or whatever it might be. But just getting the visibility of it, it's advertising it, as well as, you know, being a brand home. But also, as soon as someone steps through that door and they're like, wow, I am where they make Jensen's gin, that changes their kind of relationship with the brand. And forevermore, when they see it on a back bar, they'll be like, well, that's a safe bet because I've been to the home, I know where it's made, I know the people that make it, I've tried it, I went on the tour, and you maybe have a customer for life by just having that access point to the brand, like a physical access point.
I think it's a really important thing to us, especially now with we have a thing called the Jensen's Gin Experience. It's not really a tour, as you can see. There's not a lot to walk around, but it's a 2-hour long kind of explanation of the history of gin, like from a comical point of view and a historical point of view. And then we talk all about the gins themselves. We do comparative taste tests. We explain to people how we actually distill, and then we make them the cocktail masterclass at the end. And the whole idea is to turn, as you said, from an advocacy point of view, is to turn every single person who comes to this distillery into effectively a brand advocate for us going out. And we, the whole idea is that they come in here and they leave like surprised and delighted and feeling that they got 10 times more than they would ever expect on a gin tour. And they walk away from here going, that was really cool. And I met the really geeky guy who's waxing lyrical about the history of gin and talking about crazy stuff. And I think it provides a real kind of personable connection when, there's 4 of us who work in this company. It's a very small company in those kind of terms. And so you're actually meeting people who are responsible for this, who did actually make it, who did actually help produce it and who are the advocates and who actually do the business. And yeah, it's quite a cool thing to be able to meet people who actually make the juice that you're drinking. I think that's what most people really enjoy. So it's an authentic kind of quality.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, that's another train coming over by the sounds of things. I think it's time to move on to Tom.
We can move on to me.
Cocktail corner.
Just before we do, just one question, which apologies if we've been over this. The botanicals, the actual botanicals in terms of what's in it. Did we cover that?
We haven't, no. We've got 8. Well, we've got 10 botanicals in it. We describe 8 of them, and they're all absolute classics. We have obviously juniper at the forefront. It's a very big, important part of it. So it's Italian juniper. We're also using cassia, coriander seeds for their kind of beautiful citrus quality and a little bit of spice. We've got angelica. We've got licorice, which provides a small amount of sugar. We've got orange, we've got lemon, or just lemon in the Bermondsey Dry, actually the oranges for the old Tom, and orris fruit as well. So there are 2 other botanicals, but we don't tend to tell people because we don't want them to nick the recipe for obvious reasons. And we like to create a little bit of mystique about it. But everything we do is very traditional. That's the idea. You're going to find these botanicals in almost, you'll find them in other gins. We're not trying to be wild and different. We're trying to be classic and quintessential and ginny gin. You're going to find a lot of these same botanicals in a lot of gins. It's just harmonious balance is what we've been trying to achieve, like an orchestral swell of flavor rather than solos, if that makes sense.
Right. Cool. No, perfect. Well, it leads very nicely, as Tristan said, into the drink that I'm going to make, or I'm not going to make because I've already made it, and I'll explain why in a second. But talking about tradition and the origins of gin, go back hundreds of years, and also how you've kind of brought that back and forth. And the drink we've got this evening is a drink that's quite close to my heart, and definitely a drink as well. It's called Pearl, P-U-R-L. Now, Pearl originally, as I understand it, was effectively gin and ale. Pretty much, it was a case where back in the 17th century, I think it was, people were like, well, maybe my ale's not strong enough, and I want a shot of gin in it, or maybe my gin just needs cutting down slightly so that I can consume more of it. But either way, it was basically a cold drink with gin and ale. But it did evolve into what is effectively like a warm punch, where it's heated. Obviously, it's got spices in there. In the case of the one that I've made, I've added some nutmeg, a little bit of cinnamon in there, some orange, a little bit of sweetness. Obviously, an ale, like a dark ale, and Jensen's gin as well. And the reason it's, I guess, close to my heart, and I'm hoping Tristan's as well, is that it was the name of our very first bar. So back in 2010, when Tristan and I, 2009, 2010, when Tristan and I first started working together in business, we opened a bar in Marylebone on Blandford Street in London called Pearl, P-U-R-L, named after this particular drink. And as far as I understand it, it's still there. I'm not sure if it is or not. We've not been involved in it for now 10 years. But this is the drink that I've made, and I've just gently heated it on my stove. You know, every month we try to talk about drinks that can be made at home, that is available, you know, with ingredients that are available to everybody. And this is a perfect example of it, especially as the nights get colder, you know, and the days get colder, and we're moving through autumn to winter. Using gin this way, slightly sweetened with ale. I think a Pearl Royale, and I might be totally off the mark here, with wine as well. I think you can have wine in there as a variant of that, but with effectively with spices and sweetness. It's a toddy, really. So I've pre-made this here, and I've had it on my stove, which you won't see, but it's just behind me, warming. And I'm going to serve this my camping mug, like so. So the actual ratios are around about 5-to-1 ale to gin, and then I've added in there half a teaspoon of cinnamon, ground cinnamon. Half a teaspoon of ground nutmeg, a cinnamon stick as well. I've taken an orange and just sliced it gently and added that into there. And I've actually used agave nectar as a sweetener. I personally think honey probably works better, but I didn't have any honey, so I used agave nectar just to add a bit of sweetness to it. And there we have it. So you've got this sort of slightly bitter, because of the ale that's in there, and obviously the hops within that. Citrus-led, you know, slightly spicy winter drink with the, you know, the botanicals of Jensen's coming through and you know, sort of balancing all that together. So that's a pearl. And I'm pretty sure if you go on, you go ahead, mate. Sorry.
All I was going to say, well, good explanation. But I was going to say another way to think about it, and this may also kind of induce the production of it just when you're least expecting it, is that it's kind of like a mulled wine. So if you're out of wine and wanting to make more wine, but you've got beer and gin lying around the place, then you can get your mulled wine fix with gin and beer. And to be honest, you can use cider instead of beer as well, mix it with gin, and that works well too. So that, you know, all those kind of things are kind of interchangeable as long as you sufficiently sweeten and spice it. Probably, if you want, I mean, when we've done it in the past, Tom, we've put slices of citrus fruit like clementine and stuff in there at times, haven't we? Yeah.
Well, I mean, in this one here, look, I've got I've got some citrus in there, some orange in there.
Cool.
I just think it adds a nice fragrance to it. A little bit of that, you know, that citrus juice element just softens things down a little bit. That, for me personally, you know, I'm into my drinks, but the combination of ale, dark ale, bitter ale, and gin itself, that's it. You know, is like Marmite, right? You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. If you're really into drinks and you like that sort of thing, that real old school experience, then you're going to love it. But a lot of people might find it a bit jarring. So, you know, a bit of citrus in there. I think the sweetness is the key, because, you know, when you're using an ale that has these sort of hoppy notes and this bitterness to it, originally, as I understand it, it was bittered with wormwood, basically. Back in the day, so you would get that bitterness coming through from the wormwood, but nowadays obviously the beer is going to give you that bitterness as well. You've just got to balance it with sweetness, and you know, it's like anything. I think if you're making it at home, just add the ingredients to a point where it suits your taste, right? You know, if it's not sweet enough, add a bit more sweetness in there. I mean, it's all completely subjective at the end of the day. A bit more cinnamon or more citrus, but the basis of it is spirit, in this case gin, ale or wine or cider, spices. Basically, it's a punch.
I was just thinking about it, and another way of thinking about it is it's like a hot beer vermouth, right? Because you've got,
not sure
you've got all
It is like that, very much. Yeah, it is.
But I mean, it's cool because you could, I mean, using gin botanicals as well to kind of bolster the botanical flavor, because obviously diluting it out with a beer is a sensible approach. Like you say, you've used nutmeg and cinnamon and citrus and that sort of thing. Nothing to stop you putting coriander and licorice and the like in there as well, or juniper for that matter. Yeah, fun. You had it before, Charlie?
Not that one in particular, but we actually do make a mulled gin with cider. Yeah.
Cider.
Yeah, we have a hot. Yeah, we're using. So we have a chipotle infused gin, So we're using that along with cassia, nutmeg, cinnamon, apple, cider, demerara sugar. And we serve it hot in the winter months. And it's just a hug for your tongue. So I don't think a lot of people make a lot of hot drinks anymore in bartending terms. I think it's sad because there's some amazing things out there. But I'd love to try it. So if you can send me some, I'm
well, maybe I should come and see you, or you should come and see me at Black Rock, which is not only over the bridge from you. So
absolutely,
Tom could do a guest shift at the distillery. I think that'd be fantastic.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, I mean, if you want your drinks to go out very slow, then it would be an absolute pleasure. Yeah.
Excellent. You come here, I'll go there, and we'll do these.
There you go. That's it. I do. Cool.
Fantastic. All right, cool. Well, that's enough humour for one night, I think. Brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks so much.
Charlie.
Yeah, great chat. And thanks, Tom, for making the pearl. I've managed to consume 100 ml of gin while we've been sat here. So I ran out of tonic and I just ended up sipping it on ice. It's delicious.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
No. Cool. All right. And thank you, everyone, for watching. We shall see you next time. Goodbye.